COP26, Flop26, a festival of ocean-going hypocrisy. What do you think? And also in this hour, we will be talking to Ali Ross, the brilliant TV critic at The Sun, about all things telly. This week's terrible telly. Always a good laugh. Welcome, James.
Hi.
COP26, Flop26, not much COP26. What has it achieved? I mean, we've heard a lot of agreements. I mean, all these world leaders flew in on their private jets, made agreements behind our backs that we didn't vote for. I don't believe any of them will come to fruition. I don't think Britain will reach carbon net zero in 2050. I don't believe that Saudi Arabia will reach it in 2060 or India in 2070. Take your pick. So all these deals are being made by people who will be dead when their agreements come to fruition, and their successors are almost certainly likely to ignore them. So what has it achieved? I mean, we must say, what is it achieving? Because of course it carries on for another week or so with all the delegations still talking up there in Glasgow. What has it achieved?
Well, I think we shouldn't underestimate, Kevin, just how much resources have gone into this from our rulers' point of view, and indeed some of their successes. I mean, at one level it is an own goal, like the Owen Paterson affair. And, you know, the charges of hypocrisy have begun to stick, and talkRADIO has been very good in bringing that out. So that's rather useful if you don't like our rulers, as I don't. On the other hand, you know, they have managed to get, with some honourable exceptions, such as yourself, wall-to-wall unanimity among the media behind this cause, and behind the idea, as Channel 4 has it, that we face emergency on planet Earth, you know, a real catastrophe. And they've not only achieved that with the media classes, but they're creating an atmosphere where if you were to cavil and say important scientific things, weather is not climate, you know, science is always contested. Science can tell us about the natural world, but it cannot tell us what technology policy to pursue. That's down to us and politics. If you said any of those, you would be in the past accused of being a denialist, and now you'd probably be accused, we're heading towards the idea that you could really are a fascist, or that you're delaying the action that must be taken, and therefore you don't care about the human race. So the climate that they've created, if you'll forgive the lousy pun, you know, is very inauspicious.
I think there's a worrying orthodoxy about
Exactly.
This green obsession, and that is that we all are required to accept that all of our climate problems are man-made. I believe we've definitely made a contribution. It may be small, it may be large, but there's no proof that necessarily it's all down to mankind. It could be just the cyclical climatic changes that always happen to this planet and always did. So there's a possibility we might be able to do nothing about what's going on. But that possible truth is thrown out of court immediately. How dare you say that? That's what worries me. We've got no sensible debate is allowed about this, is it?
I think that's right. I mean, as it happens, I'm actually pleased that we have created climate change to some degree. That can easily be taken out of context, but let me tell you why. If it was all the sun, or if it was all purely to do with the Earth's natural behaviour, there'd be very little that we could do about it. I put it to you and your viewers, unpalatable though it may sound, that why wouldn't industrialisation, especially over 70 years, leave aside the now hated Industrial Revolution, why wouldn't it change atmospheric conditions, right? And therefore I think, you know, the good news is we created the problem, we can uncreate the problem. If it was all astronomical, so to speak, we couldn't do a thing. So, however, you know, the people who say it is all astronomical must be allowed to have their say. It's called free speech. And denying the denialists a platform is a very dangerous precedent to set.
Indeed, it's this sort of monomania of it all that worries me. As you say, if you're a naysayer, it's like being a Holocaust denier.
Well,
I'm not a climate change denier. I just have not seen any concrete evidence. I use the word concrete loosely, carefully, because it's a difficult word on talk radio. But I haven't seen any concrete evidence that mankind is solely responsible for what's going on. So give me the evidence and I'll go along with it. But until then, I reserve the right to question.
I think that's quite right. Now, I just got to pick you up on one thing, Kevin, because you made me think the last time I was here, and you raise your eyes to heaven. But with this phrase monomania, which I've used myself, I did a bit of research on it, otherwise known as Googling, and I found out that it's the invention of a French psychologist in the 19th century. I think his name was Esquirot, and it's subsequently been discredited by psychology and so on, because there's not much evidence apparently that people just get an idée fixe, as the French would say, fixe, which is from the idea of monomania. You know, very few people go around in life saying, right, from morning till night, I'm going to think about this cup, you know. So my point to you is that I know what you mean, and I've used it, but we've got to watch the psychobabble factor today, you know, because many of our climate bigots want to say you are mentally deranged, you are suffering, and they've got whole research programs on it about, you know, suffering from climate denial syndrome and so on. And I just think we've got to steer clear of that. You know, let's be cool and calm about it, distinguish between the categories, weather and climate, science and technology, these sorts of things. Having said all that, yes, they are obsessive.
Yes, and one thing that won't be... I read an extraordinary thing in the London Evening Standard. Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, who writes a column for the London Evening Standard because he wants to be the next leader of the Labour Party, but that's not the reason he tells you. He wrote... the question I want to ask you is about the potential for a referendum on carbon net zero. Calls are increasing for this. There's a big petition being raised. A lot of people want this because they say, you know, Boris, you might want carbon net zero, but it's going to cost us a lot of money. We're not happy with your plans. They seem loose and unfocused, and we don't quite understand what you mean, and we don't want to spend a lot of money on it. So they're saying, give us a referendum, democracy. Andy Burnham wrote, we must not allow this to happen. We must not allow this to happen. And the reason that he wrote that was because he feared that the public will come to the wrong decision. You know, he feared the democratic decision of the people, because the people would probably vote against our obsession with climate net carbon zero. And he said, we've got to get a consent, we've got to inform the people and then reach a consensus. In other words, just tell them what we're going to do. So the body politic do not want the people to get involved in this debate, because the people don't think the same as them. And that really is a long-winded way of saying what I think COP26 really achieved is the people realizing that the people who run these countries are very different from the people who live in them.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, Kevin. And you know, it has been a real, not just an own goal, but an emperor's new clothes moment, right? And even Greta, who I don't mind her, I do mind her backers, but in calling them out in the way that she's done a bit, you know, you can't help but feel some sympathy for that, because she's not all wrong, you know. Now, I think Andy Burnham, very interesting case. I've interviewed him sort of remotely for a publication I did, and it has to be said he's one of the brighter, more attractive, coming man, you know, more than most in Labour. But what he shares with the whole Labour apparatus, and quite a few Tories, and of course our Liberal and Democratic friends, the Liberal Democrats, is contempt for the plebs. The man in Whitehall, or in his case, the man up north, you know, who's a politician and has paid his dues, they know better than us plebs. And I'm afraid, you know, despite his inviting demeanour and his oratory, behind it all is that contempt for the common man. Don't let them have a say. It's like the EU, really.
He actually wrote more and more people are calling for a referendum on carbon net zero. This must not be allowed to happen.
Yeah.
This must not be allowed to happen. We need consensus among the people. We need to inform them. In other words, we need to tell them what we think and get them to go along with it.
That's right.
And this is one area where you've got cross-party agreement. You know that thing, you vote Tory, you get Green, you vote Labour, you get Green, you vote SDP, all the parties, you get Green. And all of the parties fear what the people really think about their green obsession. They do not share their green obsession, and that failure to share that is going to get worse and worse and worse, because people are going to increasingly realise the cost of all this insanity.
Well, that's right, and that's some of the upside in this, apocalyptic week that we've had. I mean, I know that some of your viewers are on the right, although right and left don't mean much anymore, as you've just said. But I'm invited by you to recall the words of the great leftist playwright Bertolt Brecht, who said, when you don't get the result that you like and you're a member of the bourgeoisie, you need to re-elect the people. And that's really what Burnham is saying. Until now, it's like the EU. You've got to vote the right way, because if you don't, we'll call the vote again. Or in this case, you might not vote the right way, in which case, we don't want to vote.
It's best to avoid the people. They always make the wrong decisions. Like that
bit
Brexit,
smelly and
that Brexit business. Finally, what was it they said about with the Tories? It's vote blue, get green, and end up in the red. There you go. James,
very good.
Great to see you.
Thank
you for coming in. Professor James Woudhuysen, Professor of Forecasting and Innovation at London South Bank University. When we come back, Ali Ross on telly. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.